Hello and welcome to the Roker Report Lasses podcast in association with Sunderland Community Soup Kitchen and Her Game 2, the campaign against sexism and misogyny in football. My name's Rich Spate and I am joined for this very special interview podcast by the man who basically runs Sunderland AFC Women. Got Alex Clark, the general manager of the Lasses, on the line for a chat this afternoon. So how are you this afternoon, Alex?
Yeah, good, thanks Rich. Thanks for having us on. Just another busy day here at the academy, but all good.
That's good to know. It's good to know everyone's busy, as it should be. Even though we're in the middle of an international break, I'm sure there's lots going on down there. But let's fly straight into it. And obviously, it's been a reasonably difficult start to the season for Sunderland. 4 league games with only a draw, only a point to our name, and then the Conti Cup game, obviously, against Liverpool, which was very narrowly lost 1-0. But we've come up against 5 pro teams this season, as Mel would say. It's been a tough start. How's morale amongst the group right now after that kind of really tough start to the season?
Yeah, I think morale's still good. I think there's been loads of positives in the game, possibly with the exception of the Birmingham one, which I think, if we're all being honest, was a bit of a write-off. But morale's good, there's been loads of positives. I think it's probably one of frustration more than anything. You look at the Liverpool game, we've played well for a lot of the game against a Super League side. We haven't conceded a goal in open play. It's been a set piece that they've had to score from to get the victory. You look at the Charlton game, took the lead twice in the game, and we haven't seen it out. Bristol again, another top side. Narrowly defeated 1-0. Their only real chance of the game. And then you look at the Durham one, the derby, particularly the opening 45 minutes, played really well. Conceded, got the equaliser there, I think Brianna, if I remember correctly, with the goal. Yes, it's one of frustration where we're just not quite getting over the line, but plenty of positives in the performances.
No panic stations yet in terms of the league table. It is pretty early, isn't it?
Yeah, it's early days. At the end of the day, we trust the players, we trust the process. We'll know there'll be other tests along the way, but we'd be more worried if the performances weren't there. But the performances have been improving. We've improved on the squad from last season, and it's just those fine margins. And if we can turn the fine margins the other way in our favour, potentially we could have been sitting here with maybe 5 points as opposed to 1 point. So no panic stations from our point of view at all at the minute.
Certainly. And those fine margins, obviously, a lot of times they come down to what's done off the pitch, don't they? And those kind of marginal gains that I'm sure yourselves and Mel and Steph are working on. But you've had some job adverts out there for a while for some new members of the backroom team there. You've recruited and announced Jonno Craig as a new goalkeeping coach, and then there's going to be a new analyst, a new sports therapist, physio. Can you give us an update about really why those roles were chosen for investment in, and why Jonno in particular was brought in?
Yeah, so the goalkeeping role, obviously it's a vital one in particular. Got 2 really good first team goalkeepers and 2 goalkeepers with women's under 23s team as well. So yeah, Jonno interviewed really well, good experience in the game, worked with Hibs Women. It was actually down in the summer when we played Hibs in the friendly. Had experience at Barnsley, a variety of clubs in Scotland, and also Real Kashmir. So yeah, Jonathan interviewed really well and has started this week in the role, and at the time of this recording will take his first training session today.
Lovely. And what's the analyst going to be doing? Is that somebody to sit within the kind of the wider analytics and data team at the club?
Yeah, so the analysts and data team, they all sit together as a unit, if you like. So the 9 to 16s analysts, the 18s, 23s and first team, so on. So when that person's recruited, they'll sit within that department, but it'll be there specifically for at Mel's Steph's disposal. So their role will be very much focusing on opposition, how they set up, a little bit of recruitment potentially, our post-game analysis is how we've played, and then one also the crucial bits as well is breaking that down into units. So working with the back four, working with the midfield players, working with the forwards, and then breaking that down into individuals as well. Software that we use, we can actually pinpoint players down into like specific actions. So we can break it down to know that a specific player's played a specific pass. We can pull all that data up so they'll have a real focus on providing that information to not only Mel and Steph, but also the players as well.
That's really good. And obviously you're recruiting a physio as well. It does make me think about some of the injuries in the squad. Emily Hutchinson, how close is she? Are we going to see her, before Christmas, or is she still a long-term injury at the club?
Probably one that the medical department answer better, but I think with her and Abby, it's progressing really well. They're on track to probably post-Christmas, but I think it's some involvement this season is probably the timescales we're looking at. But at the minute, touch wood, they've had a rehab that's going really well. We've had no setbacks as such. So yeah, it's really positive. It's just one of those where it's a case of it's just time. It's kind of,
you can't rush them.
Yeah, exactly.
Absolutely. And how's Faye after coming off the other day? Will she be a long-term thing, or is it just a knock?
It's a bit of a wait and see on Faye. So she's been assessed, just had an initial scan, and knee's still quite swollen. So it's probably one that we'll know more of next week when everything's settled down and we've had a chance to properly look and assess.
Yeah. Definitely. And then there's the other roles, really. So you've got an engagement and marketing role and a commercial role, and they'll report directly to you, is that right?
Yeah, so in terms of the structure, so everyone kind of sort of within the women's domain sits under myself, but then they'll have those specialisms. For example, I'm not the best person to ask how to edit a video if you like, so they'll have the expertise of others in the club. Yeah, it's one of those where we felt that there's certain roles where they're being carried out by other people within the business, so where they were combining it maybe alongside an academy role or a men's role, and by having someone exclusively working on the women's game in those two roles, the commercial and the engagement, it'll just allow a greater focus. It'll allow more contact time around the players in terms of creating engaging content. And it'll allow for more consistency as well in terms of what we produce. So rather than having a collective of people, if you like, it'll be those specific individuals sort of owning that area and then ultimately reporting into me, but liaising with other colleagues as well.
How important is it that the people that you recruit into those roles are actually kind of really knowledgeable and passionate about women's football in particular? Is that something that you're actually really looking for, someone who kind of really gets the slightly different audience that we have in women's football?
Yeah, massively. I think if you look at the commercial role, I think there's potentially a lot of sponsors out there, but actually are they the right fit for a women's football team? So it's in that role you need someone that's really clued up on women's sport, women's football, and it's a massive growth sector now, as you know, on the back of the Euros. So we need someone that knowledge as well, that actually we're future-proofing this. So we're not signing multi-year contracts that then undervalue ourselves. So it's really vital that role has an idea of the market. In terms of the engagement officer as well, yeah, women's football, it's football at the end of the day, but it has a different audience to men's football. So it's vital that person gets that. It's vital that they have an experience of engaging audiences, engaging different fan bases, both online, digitally, and in person as well. So to answer your question in a nutshell, yeah, it's crucial.
Yeah. So, I mean, obviously you touched on it there in terms of the growth, in terms of the Euros. I think there was a report out from the FA and UEFA just today about kind of some of the massive financial and kind of economic impact that the Euros had. And I think it was saying like 80+% of the people who watched on TV and who attended in person at the Euros want to consume more domestic women's football. And obviously there was tens of thousands of people went to the games, hundreds of thousands of people went to the games all together. So that's quite a big market. We've seen obviously record attendances at Arsenal in the WSL, Liverpool as well had huge crowd, and in our region you've had Durham setting attendance records at Maiden Castle, Newcastle pulling in thousands into Kingston Park. But would you admit that we haven't necessarily ridden that wave yet? And what do you think is behind maybe our modest crowd so far this season?
I think you're right. I think we haven't probably ridden that wave as such as others have. I think we've got to do more sort of off the field, as alluded to with those rules being advertised. I think we've got a passionate fan base that go, and I think they're really key to spreading the word. I think for us, we seem to have a lot of people that go will come back. I think retention's pretty good. I think the Nottingham Forest friendly, for example, we did a bit of analysis just in terms of when the PA announcer announced that season ticket cards were on sale. From the start of the game to the end of the game, we had a massive uptake in people buying them, and then we're seeing them people come back to the games. So I think we've got to make sure that our product's really good in terms of quality football, a quality experience. So obviously the COVID restrictions have lifted that a little bit, so we're now engaging the mascots, the flag bearers again. But I think mainly we need to have that focus on getting new people to the game, because I think you hear it time and time again with the women's game where it's like, oh, once you go, you kind of come back. So I think that's got to be one of our real focuses. I think there's challenges. I think we have a difficulty in that we obviously play at Ettlin. It's a little bit out of the city centre, so we've tried to work with sort of like Hetton School to get the car park to try and make that a little bit better, putting the supporters guide out in terms of buses and things like that. But yeah, I think the more we can engage, we've held a meeting today with some of our key partners, and more will come out on that later this week or next week around driving attendances. So we're aware of the issue. I think we can do more. I think we've tried to run some initiatives in the past where season ticket holders can bring along a friend for free, and that hasn't really turned up. But then we've done things like the Sunderland Echo wrap, and we're seeing a rise in attendance there. So I think, look, we're second season in the Championship. Last year we kind of tried some things worked, some things didn't work. We've now got a bit of a grasp of that, and it's kind of now for us really we need to push on and work on those things that will work, and the new engagement officer will be key to getting those new people through the door.
Definitely. One thing that our writers and particularly our readers have asked us to ask about is that Birmingham game, the doubleheader, which we spoke about, I think, in May when we spoke on the Twitter space. It was an exciting idea then. Well, I'll ask you a direct question. Did you and the club see that as a success in terms of audience, or was it a disappointment? What reflections have you and the club had on that day in general?
Yeah, I think you can't defend it indefensible. It was for us it was a disappointment. We were looking to get somewhere 5,000 plus, break the Championship record. I think there was a number of factors. I think the amount of stuff we had to do behind the scenes to get the double header. So we had to liaise with opposition, the AFL, Women's Championship, FA, broadcasters, loads of logistical issues, and we seem to be getting somewhere, and then there seemed to just be another consideration because it hadn't been done before. So I think it left us really tight with time in the lead up to it. So I think we probably didn't capitalise on the marketing opportunities the best we could, because ultimately it wasn't too long a window to the game. I think it was a 2-week announcement, something like that. I think that also then made it difficult because we still didn't have the final confirmations in place. We couldn't really get things like where we talked about getting engagement in the concourses, things like that. So the timing issue made it really difficult. I think as well, it was the week that Alex Neil left. That didn't help matters. The men's first team obviously got beat, and I think some people were leaving sort of early and didn't stay back. Weren't going to stay back regardless. So I think a culmination of factors. I think it was one of them where we've tried it, it didn't work out. I think the 1.5 hour gap was too long. Ultimately, we couldn't have done it any quicker because of turning around change rooms, turning around the pitch, sky de-rigging, things like that. So yeah, we tried it, we stuck our neck out. It didn't come off this time. I think if we were to do it again, I think we'd have to really evaluate kind of the pros, the cons, the whats and whys, if you like. But on the one that we did, yeah, it was a disappointment for us. Yeah,
well, and if you don't try these things, you can't learn from them, can you? And I'm sure that if and when we're back at the Stadium of Light, there'll be it'll be done differently. One of the other things that our readers have been asking about is the 11:30 kick-off time at Eppleton, which is half an hour before when Durham used to kick off, which they were always a 12 o'clock kick-off. Last season, we were 2 p.m. regularly on a Sunday. What were the reasons behind the move away from 2 p.m. and is this subject to a review at any point?
So there's an overarching reason for it, and then there's a few kind of sub reasons, if you like. The sub reasons are attendances were pretty low, so it was opportunity to try something new. So in the area now, a lot of grassroots football is it on a Saturday morning. Girls grassroots, a lot of them play at the Washington Hub and the Russell Foster League. And then you've got a lot of the adult teams, such as our Sunderland 23s, playing in the Durham County League, so the North East Regional Leagues, and they're all kicking off at 2 p.m. So we're in direct competition to that. So a lot of people said that they would like to come and watch us, but they can only come and watch us if they don't have a game, if they're not playing themselves. There's some feedback around that 2 o'clock's potentially too late in the day because it impacts on family time, going around with grandparents, a Sunday dinner and things like that. So yeah, it was a decision based on that, on that sense in terms of attendances to try something new. Durham obviously kicked off at 12 o'clock. They've generally had good attendances. We've had some games at 12 in the past last season where we didn't see any significant dip. So there was that point of view to move them forward. I think the second element of that is obviously rising costs, floodlights, things like that. So it was to consider that part because it's not only rising costs, it's usage as well. So that was a bit of a factor behind it when we decided this. But the main reason it was players. Obviously, being a part-time team, generally in the league, what generally happens is that if you do an early kick-off at home, the other team will reciprocate that and do an early kick-off away. Sometimes there's some restrictions. So Bristol City, for example, they could only get their ground at 3 o'clock. So there's nothing kind of we could do about that. But for example, when we play Southampton away, Lewis away, it's an early kick-off. Last season when we went to Lewis, we didn't get back till sort of 2 a.m. in the morning. Yeah. Players are then getting up for work early next morning. So it was basically, it was a player welfare decision. The players would rather have the early kick-off when they're away, so to reciprocate that, we did the early kick-off at home, and then to create an element of consistency across all games, rather than having 11:30 one week, 1 o'clock, 2 o'clock, and everyone not knowing where they were. We decided to keep that sort of general ballpark between 11:30, 12 and 12:30 for the games for this season.
That makes a lot of sense, particularly with the reciprocation, definitely. But we do know that a few people are struggling to get to the games that early, particularly if they're travelling from a long distance away. But one thing that we've seen this season is the live streaming repeated again from that you did at the Bristol game at the end of last season, and then we had at the Charlton game this time round. Obviously we had some technical issues against Liverpool on Sunday, and I'm sure you were all running around trying to turn things off and on again all the way through the first half of that game. Why was Twitter chosen this season above YouTube as the platform for streaming games? And are you at all concerned that maybe Twitter isn't available to or used by some of the key demographics, like kids in particular, who can't have a Twitter account? You know, under 13s aren't allowed a Twitter account, and some of the older fans who maybe aren't on social media but would be able to click a link and watch a YouTube maybe on their TV.
Yeah, so the streaming will be firstly in place at every game, except when the game is under embargo. So if it's a Saturday afternoon kick-off, as you've seen in the Birmingham game, or if the game's live on the FA Player, we can't show it, or if we're the away club, we can't stream it as well. But other than that, the game will be streamed. It's free to watch. There's no paywall behind it. We have sponsors that are funding that. At the weekend issue was, as I say, it was a technical one. It wasn't the platform that it was on or anything like that. It was purely feed from the camera into the hub where the graphics and things are produced and the stream goes live. Twitter was chosen to create an element of consistency. So we now have the the academy account, which you've probably seen, the women's account. So the idea is that them games are streamed on there. But it is feedback that we've had that YouTube would potentially be a good option as well. So we'll take that on board and look at that as well. And if it gets more people watching it and we can facilitate that, then we'll try our best to do it.
It was nice early on in the season to have BBC Newcastle covering with the radio commentary as well. I was listening from the beach the afternoon when we were getting beat by Birmingham, actually. But it is good to get that kind of exposure as well. Do you know if BBC Newcastle are going to be covering the club anymore this season, and if they are, or even if they're not, have you looked at any other options, like, say, providing a commentary yourselves, or working with a community radio station, maybe like Spark or someone like that, to make sure that fans, if they can't get to the game, maybe can't sit watching their phone, but could maybe listen on the radio? Is that something that the club's looking at?
Yeah, so I've had a conversation actually with Gary Bennett today, believe it or not. So quite on time, yeah. It's something that BBC Newcastle are looking to do. They are going to actively promote our game against London City Lionesses as well. So yeah, BBC Newcastle are going to get down to the games. In terms of partnering with other radio stations, that again would be something that the new engagement officer would potentially look at. One thing that we have been discussing is kind of doing some post-match reaction or pre-match reaction as well with Craig, our PA announcer. So if there's an injured player, for example, during the warm-up, having that bit dialogue with the crowd, interviewing some supporters that have seen the team for a while, and kind of putting that on our social platforms as well, to do a bit of that pre and post match reaction, both at the stadium at Eppleton and online.
Oh, that'll be really good. I look forward to that, because it's that kind of like storytelling, isn't it? And making people aware of who the players are and hearing their voices. That can be really important. Something that's emerged the last couple of days that this kind of it does lead on to, in terms of players' voice and the players in general and their welfare. Obviously, you will have been aware, everyone in the game's aware of kind of some of the stories coming out of France originally, and then the North American Women's Soccer League with the report that came out yesterday in terms of abuse that's been suffered by players right across from grassroots and youth football into the professional game in North America. Stories in the past about how players in this country have been treated, and it was something I just wanted to ask you about in terms of like how important safeguarding and ensuring that players have got somewhere where they can turn maybe slightly outside of the command structure in the club if they have any worries at any level, whether it's in the age groups or in the first team. How does safeguarding work, and is that something that you're really working hard on? Because I know it's just a hot topic in the game, and I'm sure if there are any parents of young players listening, they would, I'm sure, be really assured to hear about.
Yeah, I think the first thing to say is that we're going to be recruiting a safeguarding and player welfare officer.
Brilliant.
And this is in the pipeline, but before sort of this news have come out. This is actually a licence uplift for all Championship and Super League clubs. So it's something that's been on the FA's radar for a while. So we'll be doing that. We currently do have safeguard and player welfare resource at the club, but we will be putting more into it so that you have someone there specifically for the women's teams. I think the players, they have access to psychologists at the club. So we have Tom Lishman, who's come on board this season purely for the women's team. Tom's a lecturer at a university, and he's doing some work with the players as well. We have Greg Irvin, who's the club psychologist. In terms of general well-being, we now have Emmy Campbell, who's the club's nutritionist. She's actually in the process of getting, I think it's somewhere between the region of 8 to 10 interns for all the club's teams as well, of which the women are part. So the women have had some support off Emmy. So sort of from a psychological and nutrition perspective, you've obviously then got the S&C staff, you've got the physio staff in terms of the rehabilitation and things like that. You've got the private health care that the club provide. So there's also outside support in terms of occupational health. Club use a service called Recovery for Life, which employees, players have access to if they need that support away from the club. So there's a variety of support there for players. It's something the club takes really seriously, and it's something again that we're just looking to expand on and improve our offering to the players. We're trying to help with jobs, part-time work. We're trying to help with careers advice, work experience, placement, shadowing, what it may be. So it's just not looking at people as footballers, but it's looking at them as people and trying to look after them as people first and foremost, and then that can all then support the football.
That's really important, and it's really great to hear the massive range of stuff, and I think again it's like one of the selling points of our club, isn't it? That off the field support and the whole kind of professional setup behind the scenes that we've got. It's really good to hear. The final question I've got really is more of a long-term one, really. We've seen the DCMS launching the review of women's football under Karen Carney. That's going currently. How are the club and how are the club engaging in that process? And how closely are you and the rest of the club working with the Football Association and the other clubs on any plans for kind of expansion and reorganisation of the professional leagues in the years ahead? Because it's going to be probably 2024, 25 when there might be a window for expansion. What's your involvement in both of those kinds of processes?
So in terms of the review by Karen Carney, obviously that's just been announced. It's sort of in its infancy. As general managers, we've all been invited to preliminary meetings on that, and then I believe the intention is to invite players, club staff, so on and so forth. So it's something that all the clubs will heavily be getting involved in. In terms of liaising with the FA are the game's growing at a rate of knots. It's supercharged. So there's meetings constantly taking place around pathways, around what the model looks like in 1 year's time, 2 years' time, 10 years' time, 20 years' time. So these conversations are ongoing and evolving, and I think after the summer, a lot of the conversations that have been had have almost been too light. They've had to go back to the drawing board and kind of go, we need to do this, we need to think about this. So the conversations are always happening, they're always ongoing, and yeah, hopefully it's all to a benefit and we can progress the game together.
No, that's really optimistic, actually, and just for our listeners as well, the window is now open, I think, for fans to contribute on the DCMS website. I'll put a link in the show notes for this podcast about how you as a women's football fan can get involved as well. And I think it's important that fans have a voice in that alongside, as you say. I think it's great that the players and coaches are going to be talked to by Karen. Obviously she's got a lot of experience in the game, and DCMS have got a lot of experience running these kinds of reviews as well, so I'm sure hopefully that's something really positive will come out of that. And it's good to hear that the FA are kind of ramping up all of their plans as well, because like you say, it is an exciting time. So I just want to say thanks, Alex. I know you've only got a short amount of time and you've got training to get to and stuff as well. Thanks a lot for your time this evening. No, thanks Rich, thanks for having us on. No problem, and please do check out Roker Report and all of the women's football content on there. We'll have some articles coming up even during the international break. There's a few things for us to talk about, and check out the other podcasts as well, and also the Roker Report podcast. We've got an interview out with Danny Graham, which is a very good listen. If anyone hasn't heard that, please go to the Roker Report podcast feed and you'll be able to hear that. So thanks to everyone for listening, and thanks again, Alex, and we'll speak to you all later. Ta-ra.